Good afternoon, my name is David Reisinger, and today I'm going to go over my presentation of volunteer recruitment and retention for service organizations. I chose to do my project on Habitat for Humanity. Since 1976, they've helped 29 million people build or improve the place they call home. Last year they had 1.4 million volunteers and built 1,256 homes across the United States. The Habitat for Humanity not only reaches all 50 states, but they're also involved in more than 70 countries, and they operate on volunteers, donations, and donated material. The scope of my research, my hypothesis was that potential volunteers would be more inclined to volunteer with Habitat for Humanity if they were paid by their employers. I currently work with a government agency where we have 2 wingman type days a year that we host team building events, as do other companies. I performed a literature review where I had examples and facts about volunteer recruitment and different approaches to increase volunteerism, and conducted a survey of 69 potential volunteers to find ways to increase over the baseline and test the hypothesis. Some of the facts from the literature review were that volunteers often are with multiple organizations, so if the plan isn't good for what they're volunteering, they might switch organizations or drop out altogether. Volunteers are less dependent than paid employees, where you have to be ready to be prepared not to have all your volunteers show up. And for an organization like the Habitat for Humanity, where materials are delivered and work is ready to be performed, you need to make sure that your people are there. Some of the studies show that awards and training improve retention rates, and the bottom bullet here goes right in line with my hypothesis, where one way to increase volunteerism is to approach established businesses as team building events. The study went on to talk about a cable company who utilized this, and it was great results within the team and just bonding everybody together. The next slide here, after the literature review, I wanted to utilize a survey to see the inputs from families and friends and friends of friends. The survey consisted of 10 questions. Most of them ranged from answers of very unlikely to very likely. I used a baseline question to see how the potential volunteers were without any changes. The survey was open for 7 days, and like I said, we had family, friends, and then friends of friends do the survey. Next, we have the results. We had 69 surveys that were complete in full. There was a noticeable 26% increase for the potential volunteers if they were paid by their employers as a team building event. Over 85% chose social media as the best avenue to reach them. And then there was also a noticeable increase when training was given, knowing about the home recipient, and when the event was local. The next 3 slides, we're going to go over some of the results from the surveys. The first question here, this was my baseline question. So this took into account where everybody stood and how likely they would be to volunteer for the Habitat for Humanity. Roughly 54% of the surveyors said that they would likely volunteer or very likely to volunteer. And that number is important because we're going to look back at it in the next 2 slides. The number 1 and 2 reasons for not volunteering was that the potential volunteers didn't have enough time or just did not know about the opportunities that were out there. So for the next slide, I actually spent time working with the Habitat for Humanity, and I saw some of the jobs that were done, whether it was sawing wood or painting, and I really wanted to get a feel for one of the reasons for Habitat for Humanity might be that people felt like they didn't have the experience. So this question here showed that basically 40% of people said they did not want to volunteer because they didn't feel like they had the experience necessary. The next chart there basically says that 80% of the potential volunteers would be more likely to volunteer if they knew about the home recipient. For the next chart, I put these two together. The first one is basically testing the hypothesis. This is the question of how likely would you be to volunteer for the Habitat for Humanity if you were being paid. Roughly a 26% increase over the baseline question that people would volunteer if they were being paid by their employer. And then the bottom question here basically says the same thing, but if you're not paid, if you do this on your own time, but with your same coworkers, church family, or just family in general, showed us a 16% increase over the baseline question. In conclusion, what I found during the research is even large nonprofit organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, they still face challenges in recruiting and retaining volunteers. The only way they can survive is to have those volunteers. And some of the research that I found is really social media is the best avenue to reach people. And the research also shows that potential volunteers are more likely to give their time if they had training opportunities, they knew about the people that was going to receive the benefits, and then they knew that there was local opportunities as well. And then the final bullet there, the research did prove that reaching out to businesses and organizations to volunteer their time could be a successful way to bring on new volunteers. And that's it.